We're going to start by setting our motivation to become Buddhas. So we need the bodhicitta mind. And in order to develop that, we need this compassion. And that has two really important elements that help us to bring about great compassion. We need to be able to see other people as lovable, which is challenging in itself and wonderful to spend time doing. And we need to understand and be aware of their dukkha, their suffering. And so this kind of suffering is really the third suffering. What it is to be born in cyclic existence. What it is to repeatedly take this body and mind, these five aggregates, again and again, endlessly. I think that's it. Yeah. Under the control or influence of tainted karma and afflictions, and especially ignorance. So this is our situation, and this is other people's situation. One easy way to think about that third suffering is just to think our desires are endless, our activities are endless, and our death and rebirth are endless. And that kind of sums it up. If you understand the broader points, you can remember it with those three. So tonight we're going to focus on meditation on the body, and specifically what it is composed of. And this helps us to really look more closely at exactly what we're grasping due to our karma and our afflictions. And the body is one of the main elements that binds us to cyclic existence. It's one of the five aggregates. So let's just spend a moment thinking about this verse from the three principal aspects of the path from Lama Tsongkhapa. We have to develop our own renunciation in order to really move on to bodhicitta. So just think about this. It kind of pulls together everything we're going to talk about tonight. For you embodied beings, bound by the craving for existence, without the pure determination to be free, this renunciation, from the ocean of existence, there is no way for you to pacify the attractions to its pleasurable effects. Thus, from the outset, generate the determination to be free. So I think that this, what we've been focusing on the last weeks has been 4 establishments of mindfulness, and we've just done mindfulness of mind last time. So Venerable asked me to talk about this meditation on the body that we studied here at the Abbey previously. And to introduce this topic, well, in the handout she gave us, there were 6 sutras that we never really studied, but I spent the last few weeks, 3 weeks or more, studying them and listening to commentaries. And I want to share this really short, simple one because it's stayed with me the last number of weeks and I found it helpful. And I think it gives a feeling for why we would do this meditation on the body. Because one thing she said is she wasn't so happy with how our class went, and she mentioned that to me, and also that she wanted me to focus on the purposes of why we do this meditation. So this really helps. There was a man, a householder named Nakulapita, and he, actually I guess he was a father to the Buddha 500 times in previous lives. But anyway, he comes to the Buddha at Deer Park. He says, and it's just him and the Buddha. He circumambulates and very polite and does all the paid homage and all that. And he said, I am old, Venerable Sir, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, come to the last stage, afflicted in body, often ill. I rarely get to see the Blessed One and the bhikkhus worthy of esteem. Let the Blessed One extort me, Venerable Sir, let him instruct me, since that would lead to my welfare and happiness for a long time. Now the Buddha says, so it is, householder, so it is. This body of yours is afflicted, weighed down, encumbered. If anyone carrying around this body were to claim it to be healthy, even for a moment, what is that due to other than foolishness? Therefore, householder, you should train yourself thus. Even though I am afflicted in body, my mind will be unafflicted. Thus you should train yourself. And then the man was so happy and blissed out, he left. He didn't ask anything of the Buddha. But then he went right over to Venerable Sariputta, and Sariputta says to him, householder, your faculties are serene, your facial complexion is pure and bright. Did you get to hear a Dhamma talk today in the presence of the Blessed One? And then the man says, why not, Venerable Sir? Just now I was anointed by the Blessed One with the ambrosia of a Dharma talk. Which is kind of like what we do when we go to teachings, you know. I thought that was funny. And then, you know, a few words are said, and then Venerable Sariputta says, well, didn't it occur to you, householder, to question the Buddha further as to how one is afflicted in body but not afflicted in mind? And then he goes, oh, yeah, maybe I should, you know, people would come from very far away to learn this. So then Sariputta's, okay, how, householder, is one afflicted in body and afflicted in mind? Here, the uninstructed worldling, who is not a seer of noble ones, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their dharma, regards form as self, or self's possessing form, or form in self, or self as in form. He lives obsessed by these notions, I am form, form is mine. As he lives obsessed by these notions, that form of his changes and alters. With the change and alteration of form, there arises in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. And then, actually, what happens then in the sutra is he then goes through the 5 aggregates with the same thing. You know, he regards feeling as self, or self as possessing feeling, or feeling as in self, or self as in feeling. He lives obsessed by the notions, I am feeling, feeling as mine. Goes through the same thing, and then perceptions, this is a Pali translation, perceptions, and then they call it, not conditioning factors, but I forget the word right now. Volitional formation is how it is in this translation, and then consciousness. This is, I think, a very...
I'm sorry, could you say what the name of the sutra is again? I was offline.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the sutra is called, this is one of the connected discourses on the aggregates. It's called Nakula Pita. It's number 22 of this sutra called Kanda Samyutta, which is actually a collection of 159 sutras or so on the aggregates. So this is one simple, short one that really stuck with me. Okay, so what I found most useful from this whole time I spent focusing on this body parts that we're going to go over tonight was this part. I found quite useful in terms of when things come up in my mind, just being able to say to myself, because we've been studying all these feelings and the mental factors and then the consciousness, right? And what happens is you feel very much like you are that. And so a thought goes through your head and it's disturbing, and you feel like, I'm that depressed person. So that's, you know, as you see in the verses here, it really, I find these quite useful. So just remember that as we get farther on. So that's why I wanted to share this one. But this focus is mostly on the body. But it's applied to all of those 5 aggregates. So then, Sariputta goes on and says, well, how is one afflicted in body but not afflicted in mind? Here, householder, the instructed noble disciple, who is a seer of the noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their dharma, does not regard form as self, or self as possessing form, or form in self, or self as in form. He does not live obsessed by the notions, I am form, form is mine, or I am feeling, feelings is mine, and so on. as he lives unobsessed by these notions, that form of his changes and alters. With the change and alteration of form, there do not arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. So this is what the Buddha taught. And then this is really what this is leading us about, is how we have these distortions. And we have the teaching on the 4 distortions, and they're all contained in this story. And so what are these 4 distortions? They're basically 4 basic ways that we distort and misconstrue our experience. And we do this like all the time. And the reason they're called distortions is because they're actually the opposite of how things actually are. And so I want to read the sutra that this comes from, because it's also very short, but I think it really gives a good feeling for it. This is in the Pali tradition again. And so it, sometimes they use slightly different words than we do, but it's the same. And it's called distortions. Vipalasa Sutra. Distortions. It's from the Numerical Discourses of the Buddha, number 49 in the 4th book. So anyway, monks, there are these 4 distortions of perception, 4 distortions of thought, and 4 distortions of view. What for? To hold that in the impermanent there is permanence, this is a distortion of perception, thought, and views. To hold that in suffering there is happiness, this is a distortion of perception, thought, and views. To hold that in what is non-self there is a self. To hold that in the foul there is beauty. And so then he goes on to say, what are the 4 non-distortions of perception, thought, and views? To hold that in the impermanent there is impermanence, that in suffering there is suffering, or dukkha, that in what is non-self there is no self, and that in the foul there is foulness. These are the 4 non-distortions. And then it's got 2 more paragraphs. Those who perceive the changeful to be permanent, suffering as bliss, a self in the selfless, and who see in the foul the mark of beauty, such folk resort to distorted views, mentally deranged, subject to illusions. And another translation had this as destroyed by wrong view, gone mad, out of their minds. That captured my attention. Caught by Mara, not free from bonds, they are still far from the secure state. Such beings wander through the painful round and go repeatedly from birth to death. But when the Buddhas appear in the world, the makers of light in a mass of darkness, they reveal this teaching, the noble Dharma that leads to the end of suffering. When people with wisdom listen to them, they at last gain their sanity. They see the impermanent as impermanent, and they see suffering just as suffering. And they see the selfless as void of self. And in the foul, they see the foul. By this acceptance of right view, they overcome all suffering. So this is what's happening when we're dealing with our body, amongst other things. And the meditation that we're going to focus on tonight, a lot of it focuses on the foulness of the body, but it actually contains all 4 of those points. So this body meditations, there are many, and we've gone through some in the last weeks with Venerable Children, and they're very common in the Pali tradition, and they're also, there's a lot of mention in Shantideva, especially chapter 8, but also in chapter 5. And so this is a practice that we do, especially this meditation on the foulness of the body parts. We do this, one of the main reasons we do it is for renunciation, as the motivation tried to give a sense of. But we don't do this to hate our bodies or to see the body as evil, which is sometimes easy to do, I think, if you're raised in certain cultures. So that's not what it's about. If your mind goes that far with this meditation, you're off track. That's not what it's about at all. it's just seeing the body for what it is. And in the actual sutra, the Buddha describes it as, like a bag with an opening on two ends with all these different kinds of rice in it, and you're just looking at it. This is this kind of rice, and this is this kind of grain, and this is this, and this is that. That's what the sutra actually says. It's not like you don't want to go overboard, I guess is the point. So it's more like this, seeing the body for what it is, and coming to a wisdom mind that says, I really don't want this body in the future. We grasp at it, but it's really like realizing they're eating lousy food and then deciding, no, I don't really want this anymore. That's kind of what it's about. So this is not something, these are, kind of a different kind of meditation, but it's not one that you do at the very beginning of the path. So there's a place, like in the Lam Rim where we have the 3 levels of practitioners. The initial scope really thinks about the body as it's a precious human life. And you have to have that, you have to have that in your mind first. It's precious, it's rare. Don't indulge it, but understand how valuable it is. And to have a mind in this kind of body gives us an amazing opportunity. But then in the middle scope, in order to understand the Four Noble Truths and in order to develop renunciation, these body meditations are done, and including this one of seeing the body's foulness, because it's a distortion to see it as beautiful. And so when we were going through our class, I listened to a number of our classes and took notes. Someone said, well, doesn't this kind of contradict the idea of a precious human life? But no, it really doesn't. It's just seeing that the body is the basis of our mind, and that this mind can get us out of samsara. And so it's like a tool, and we need to keep it clean, and we need to keep it healthy. And why? So that we can practice the Dharma. That's really the way to think about it. So that is versus our usual, and the way we were raised and we're indoctrinated and trained and conditioned to see the body as beautiful. It's like this perfect machine. But actually, it's not so perfect. Every part in it can fall apart. Every part, So we put a lot of fabrication on the body. So this meditation is not about hating the body, it's about breaking this hallucination that we have. And then just really asking yourself, what am I attached to here? So that's what it's about. And also, we hold on to this body. We think it's a big part of our identity, and then we cling to be reborn into it. And so these things can just get really knocked down. And I think I don't know, I've been focusing on this for some weeks, and I found it really helpful and useful. I think it's not anything like what I thought it was going to be like. I actually didn't want to do this meditation, and I feel completely differently about it now. It makes my mind sober in a way that's quite good, and it just feels quite realistic, and I think it really can lead to renunciation. And so, I don't know. Well, as we go through these points, I think maybe this will help. So basically, the purposes of this meditation, what is me in all of these body parts? We want to quench this mind that thinks the body is beautiful, and we want to see that there's like a sentient being trapped in this contraption. A skeleton with a bunch of muscles on it and all these foul parts that we don't really see as such. When they teach this meditation, it's very common in the Pali tradition. They have in Thailand, they'll have skeletons in their temples, and they go and, as Venerable said, go to see, what's it called? Autopsies. And they do this, one of the foremost reasons is an antidote for sexual desire, because that's the biggest desire in a way. And this is the main reason that people disrobe, so it's a very common thing to do in a monastic setting. But as Bhikkhu Bodhi said, he says, I never apologize when I teach this to lay people. It's very useful to be able to control your lust. It's very useful. You know, there may be certain days that you don't want to be sexual for different reasons, like they're holy days or this or that, or maybe you are attracted to somebody that's not somebody you want to get involved with. I mean, it's very helpful. These meditations work if you go about them correctly. So that's one thing, is antidote for sexual desire. And then Venerable feels strongly, and I think I read this in some of the other things I was studying, is that it helps us to decrease the clinging at the time of death. Because you know how it works in the 12 links. If you are dying and you're craving, you know, craving is the wanting the experience, and then you go from there, from wanting the experience to like grasping or wanting to appropriate, you know, like you go into the action for the object then. So, or clinging. So it's craving goes to clinging, goes to existence. What happens is at the time of death, because you know the 12 links are explaining rebirth, is if you're craving, like you're like freaking out, like I'm going to lose this body, it's all I know, it's all I have, and you have it in mind that it's this wonderful thing, of course you're going to grasp at it. But if you can break that, then, you know, because you don't want your mind in that kind of state, because if you're clinging, craving and clinging at the time of death, then the karma that is going to ripen at that time, because you've in the past we've created all kinds of karma. It's in like a latent form, and it's just ready to burst then. And that's what existence is. Existence is this karma that's just now going to ripen, and then boom, you're going to go to birth after that. So you want your mind to be very peaceful. You don't want to be like freaked out and holding on to a body that's like fallen apart, you know, and not going to do you any good, you know. So that's what this is about. And she says in here, we're clinging to a toilet. And I think it's funny because the sutra actually says, at least one of them says, a bag with openings at both ends. But then I'm sure I've read a thing that said like a bag of filth with a mouth at each end. But I'm pretty sure it's a composting toilet. I think this is a really helpful, you know, if you really want to have, you know, foulness in your face, just, you know, shovel manure for a few days. Anyway, so that's what the second thing is, to decrease clinging at the time of death. And the third one is to really understand what samsara means. What is it to be taking these five aggregates, this body and mind, under the influence of ignorance, tainted karma, these mental afflictions? We've done this over and over again. Seeing how our mind is trapped in this body by this craving. And when we really can get a feel for that, then this helps us with our renunciation, because we can see, well, wow, look at what I'm doing. This is just so nuts. You know, and if we don't do this, if we don't go this way, we do what's Dharma light, and we never really penetrate into what is craving and what is ignorance. And so I think this one on the body is just so right there. It's like pretty easy to do this, to see, at least at a beginning place, what's happening here. So when we have that sense of what samsara is about, then we will have more renunciation, and this helps us to have the bodhicitta, because we see, you know, this leads us to have compassion for others, because we see everyone is trapped like this. And the fourth reason she gave had to do with self-generation. So the clear appearance of the self as the deity. This is a mindfulness of the body, but it's a purified body, where you dissolve the flesh and bones into emptiness and then rise with the body of light. And she felt that this, by doing these other meditations on the body, it could be helpful, because you pay more attention. And so now I want to read something from Bhikkhu Bodhi. That first story I told was from the Connected Discourses, and he translated all of them. It's this big. This book is this 3.5 or 4 inches wide, and he wrote this. This part has like 159 sutras, and he wrote this introduction to it. And so I want to share this part that he wrote, because some excerpts from that, because he actually took kind of like the highlights from many of these sutras, and it just puts everything in the proper perspective, I think. So the first part relates to dukkha, or the suffering. So this group of the Book of Aggregates is what it's called, that group of sutras, he's kind of introducing it. And he said that they stress in various ways that the 5 aggregates are dukkha, or suffering. And this is clearly something that the Buddha said when he first turned the wheel of Dharma. He said, in brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. And now he goes on to explain why. The aggregates are suffering because they tend to affliction and cannot be made to conform with our desires. And then he puts a reference. So almost everything I'm saying here is reference to one of these sutras. This isn't so much him speaking, it's him compiling all these things in a way that's quite useful, like the Cliff Notes. So the aggregates are suffering because they tend to affliction and cannot be made to conform to our desires. Why? Because attachment to them leads to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. And because their change induces fear, distress, and anxiety. So we don't like that. And even more pointedly, he says the 5 aggregates not only lead us to this, because they don't conform and they tend towards affliction, not only that, but they are already dukkha. Why? Because they're impermanent. And because of that, they can never fulfill our hopes for perfect happiness and security. And while they give pleasure and joy, which is their gratification in them, eventually they must change and pass away, and this instability is the danger perpetually concealed within them. And though we habitually assume that we are in control of the aggregates, in truth, they are perpetually devouring us, making us their hapless victims. Those are quotes again, not his words. To identify with the aggregates and seek fulfillment in them is to be like a man who employs as a servant a vicious murderer out to take his life. That's another quote. I think it's actually the case. If you think about it, when every single part can fall apart, and we watched the Gyalwa. I mean, his little body just kind of ran out of gas. Just the parts fall apart. It's like an old clunker, driving around this old car for so many years, everything's falling apart. It's impermanent. It's the clinging, though, that is the problem. So then he says a little bit about that, and this is, I think, where we start getting ourselves out of this ditch. So clinging, as it would be called, is one of the links in the chain of dependent origination. That link that leads into the production of a new existence in the future, which I kind of tried to explain. So this clinging to the 5 aggregates, he says, occurs in 2 main modes, and he calls them appropriation and identification. And this is, I think, what really I took the most out of this teaching, was this next part, in terms of outside of doing the meditation, when I'm walking around, I find myself thinking about this part. So these 2 things, appropriation, which is kind of the translation that Thupten Jinpa uses for that 9th link, which is clinging or appropriation or grasping. But Thupten Jinpa uses the word appropriation. So in clinging to the aggregates, one either grasps them with desire and lust, and assumes possessions of them, which is the appropriation, or one identifies with them, and you then take them as the basis for one of 2 things, either for conceit or for views about one's real self, which is this identification process. So in this long series of 159 sutras, this phrase is met many times because of how we think about the aggregates. This is how we think about them. This is mine, this I am, this is myself. And it's scattered throughout these sutras. Because here, this is mine, this represents that appropriation, this function of craving. It's mine. We lust after it, we desire it, we want to have it. It's mine. This body is mine. And then we have the notions, this I am and this is myself. So this I am is this expresses of the conceit, related to conceit. This I am. And this is what I've found quite useful, is like through the day something would come to my mind and I would just say to myself, I'm not that. You know, when things are bothering you, a lot of times your mind's fallen into this thing and you quite identify with the experience in one of these three ways. And you feel miserable because of it. And so, you know, we might do it related to conceit, or we might do it to views, which is this is myself. Identification related to views. This is myself. So you can feel like I'm a depressed person, and you can get bummed out about that. That's like, this is myself. That's who I am. I'm this depressed person. Or you can have this feeling that's very strong. This is what I am. I am this. You know, it's this conceit of I am this. And, you know, it's just so interesting. I find this quite helpful because when one of my negative thinking comes and I kind of react to it, I just could say, I'm not that thought. I am not that negative thinking, and I can just kind of let it go easier. It's been quite helpful that way. So this is, these parts, the appropriation part relates more to the foulness of the body meditation, and the identification parts relate more to the insight meditation, because the meditation on the body can be used for both serenity or concentration and insight. And so some of the other sutras that were on our list, I listened to some commentaries by Bhikkhu Bodhi. They were very interesting, but not the subject for tonight too much. And that's looking at the body in terms of the elements. Okay, so then the last thing Bhikkhu Bodhi says about this, to break our appropriation of the aggregates, the Buddha often enjoins us to abandon desire and lust for them. But to give up clinging is difficult because clinging is reinforced by views which rationalize our identification with the aggregates and thus equip clinging with a protective shield. That's the part I think I want to really see in my own experiences, how my identification and how my views rationalize this. I think that's very worthwhile to try to see. And then his summary is that all the different expositions of the three characteristics, which are basically kind of the four distortions minus the one on foulness, which is in the Pali tradition, they always are focusing on the three characteristics. They converge on one point, which is the eradication of clinging, by showing that with regard to each aggregate, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And that's a kind of insight meditation. So this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. So now we get to the body and all these parts. And I gave a handout to some of you, but I'm just going to read this for people who don't have the handout. This is all very easy to find online. Just put in Buddhism, foulness of the body, and you don't need to write these down. But basically, when we do this meditation on mindfulness of the body, whether you're going to use it for insight or concentration, whether you're going to use it for the elements or the foulness of the body, you first start by learning these 6 groups of how they put the 32 parts. So they're in groups of 5 and 6. And so I'm just going to read these. Skin pintad is the first one. And it's what you memorize then is head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin. And then the next is the kidney pintad. And what you memorize there is muscles, tendons, bones, marrow, kidney. And then the third pentad is the lung pentad. And what you memorize there is heart, liver. We came up with fascia, but actually I'm pretty convinced now that this should have been diaphragm. So I would change that, because I remember our long discussion about this and the different references that Venerable gave, and it's listed as diaphragm in other ones, and I think that's actually more accurate. So heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs. And then the fourth one is the brain pentad. intestines, mesentery, gorge, feces, brain. And I'll go back and explain these a little bit for some of the words that might be new to people. The fifth one is the fat, cestad. Now there's going to be 6. This is bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat. And then the next one is the 6 grouping is a group of 6, the urine, cestad, tears, grease, spittle, snot, joint fluid, and urine. Okay, so head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, that's the first one. Muscles, tendons, bones, marrow, kidney, that's the second. Heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs. Intestines, mesentery. Mesentery is this kind of like a wrapping of your intestines, huge layer and layer and layer of stuff that has all those blood vessels and stuff in it, holds everything in place. The next one is gorge, that's the contents of your stomach. Feces is your poop, while it's still in you. Brain. Bile is something that comes out of your gallbladder and it emulsifies fat, breaks up fats when you don't have it. You can't eat fat. Phlegm, I think most people know what that is, but actually not everybody knew that when we went through this. Phlegm is, my understanding is what kind of comes up from your throat, but when I looked back through our notes, somebody might have looked it up and they also said it came out of your nose, but that didn't make much sense because we also had snot. So anyway, in our body chart that we made an Excel program and put all this information in it when we spent like 6 or 7 sessions going through all this stuff, learning about anatomy and whatever. Anyway, phlegm, pus, people know that, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease. Grease is actually kind of like the oil on your skin. They especially refer to it around the shoulders and the hands and feet. And then spittle is spit, snot, comes out your nose. Joint fluid, their word was oil of the joints. The correct word would be synovial fluid, but we just made it joint fluid because it was more user-friendly. And urine. So that's what you do when you start to learn this, is first you just try to memorize those. And there's a man who has a nice thing online, easy to find, that has done this meditation a lot. I'm not sure if he's a monk. He might be. He lives at a kind of a forest practice monastery. And he said that he didn't find it necessary to memorize them first, but he just put the list in front of him, and he's quite readily memorized them. So he had it like on his puja table. And just. So first you learn it verbally, and you say it out loud, or if you're with a group, I guess you have to say it to yourself. And you do it by each group, just one group at a time, the first 5. And you usually learn it forwards and backwards. And so you learn it first verbally, and then you learn it, say it mentally, and then after that you start looking into what are the color of these things, what is their shape, what is their direction, which meant is it above or below the navel, what is their location, kind of know where it is in the body, and what is their, it says delimitation, basically know what's around it. And so could you get that book for me? It's on the shelf downstairs, that anatomy book with the pictures. Okay, John's going to get it. I forgot I was going to, actually there is stuff online where they have pictures and everything, but we use this one anatomy book that I have, because I've had a lot of anatomy, and I've had a lot of, what's interesting about being around cadavers a lot is I never got any of this in my mind from being around them. I would be around these cadavers, I would do all, I think I figured out it was like 4 or 5 quarters. I've spent a lot of time around cadavers, and never, I'd leave there and body beautiful. Unless you put this into the context, I never in my life ever would have come to this. I worked with the body, I was in hospitals, I've seen all the way down to people's bones and debrided stuff, I've seen all kinds of stuff, all kinds of messed up. I worked as a physical therapist, I saw all kinds of people with problems, and your mind never goes there unless you train it. And so you need the Buddha's teachings to get to this. I can tell you that for sure, because I've had a lot of exposure to bodies and parts. And this book, do you think they can see that? This book is expensive, and they have a paperback, and it's smaller, but what's nice about this one is it's life size. And this is photographs of the body, and I knew we wouldn't have time, so I didn't really go through, but here's the bones, here's some muscle. It's really what it looks like. There's some ribs with muscle on them, and you know, there's some x-rays. There's your skin, there's your belly button. There's what you see on the inside. Look at that. I don't know. Yeah, but I don't want to find it right now. If somebody else could, if you want to look it up, if you look in the back. But it's kind of useful. I mean, you might not be able to recognize things. Like when they're like this, it's almost kind of hard to, what is that? Unless you've had anatomy, you're like, I don't know what that is. Anyway, if you want to look up mesentery in there, then we can show people. It's, you know, they're cadavers, so they're, you know, they're not exactly. I found that when we were going through this, there's a tendency in my mind, because I've had a lot of anatomy, is to think of diagrams in books and to really sanitize the whole thing. Really a strong tendency to do that. So when I do this meditation now, because you want to evoke the feeling of foulness, you can't have it as an object outside of you. It can't be like this bone over there. You have to, you're trying to evoke it foul, the foulness of it. And so sometimes, because I've had my hands on things a lot, when I think of touching things, it doesn't seem that foul to me in some ways. But then I would think of like, but do I want to put it on my cheek? And I go, no, I don't want to put that spleen on my cheek or the kidney or anything. And so I had to, in my meditation the last few weeks, I'd think like, well, I've touched these things, and I might have some gloves on, and it's a little not okay, but not that bad. And then I would say, but do I want to put it on my cheek? No, I don't. And so that helped me a lot. And then this one monk, he said, when you're thinking about skin, they talk about like take it off of the body. And what he did was he'd like think about like chicken skin, which I think is actually also kind of useful, because it's here like this, it kind of seems clean and nice. But if you just pulled it all off, it wouldn't look so good. And that's the problem sometimes for me. I find I sanitize the whole thing. So sometimes when I do the meditation, I try to think of, because I'm used to those pictures, and I'm used to a cadaver or a skeleton. Well, really a bone, when I find one out in the woods, is not anything like the one you see in a lab. Those are all clean. The one you find out in the woods, if it's fresh, has got stuff all over it. And so I think that you want to just see things for what they are. That's what you're trying to do here. So you first start by, learning the verbal recitation, then the mental recitation, learn the color, the shape, the direction that is above or below the navel, the location, like, where's the heart, where's the lungs, where's the, intestines, and kind of know where they are in you, and then what's around them. And then what you want to do from there is you want to follow the order. And this is something that I hadn't actually done, because I can visualize a lot of anatomy because I've spent a lot of time with it. But now I've gone back, and because I would do like the first few pentads that I had memorized, and then I would just kind of think about all the parts. But I'm seeing now from what I've read this last few weeks that you should stay with the order that they give, and I think that it's a good idea, because I have done that now, and I think it's better than what I was doing. And so, you do follow the order. You don't skip parts. And Venerable has said, don't do it too quickly, or you're just kind of on automatic. But don't do it too slow, because you want to finish and you want to know all the parts. But then what will kind of happen is, she said also ward off any distractions, or you're just kind of spacing out. But once that you're familiar with the meditation and the names take you to the point of feeling of the foulness, then kind of drop the name. You're supposed to stay with the feeling of the foulness explicitly. And so, what was I going to say? There was another thing that I found helpful, and I just went in one ear and out the other. Okay, I'll probably come back to it. Okay. So that's kind of the basic thing that you do in terms of learning this meditation. But then how do you use it? This one we're doing for the foulness, but then if you memorize that list, those pentads and sestads, you can also use it if you study the insight meditation on the elements of the body. And then you could use that list also, which is not enough time tonight to go into that at all. So we'll just talk first just about the first one, the skin pentad. Head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin. Think about what, in some ways what a big deal we make about our hair. Men and women both fuss about it, but it's kind of smelly sometimes. And it might look quite nice when it's on your head, but when you find it in the shower, on the floor, you're not so happy. Or as Buddhaghosa said, if you're having trouble seeing it as foul, just imagine this strand of black hair in your food. Well, now it's not so beautiful. Or if there's somebody you're attracted to and hair is a big thing and teeth are a big thing and all that, just take their hair off of them. And is it really so beautiful then? Or if you think they have a great smile, just take all the teeth out of their head and set them on the table. What is beautiful in that? And this is what happens when you do this meditation. Actually, outside of tears, everything else you'll probably find to be foul if you get there. So, this is kind of the way you do it. You really look at things. What are they? And, a lot of things kind of smell. And we have this real kind of hallucination around this. So then in our group we had these reactions, and I thought this was useful to share. So Venerable had said something like, seeing the body as loathsome and caused by karma and afflictions, and our response to that was like, we all had different responses. One person was like, seeing the body as loathsome, forget it. And me, I was like, caused by karma and afflictions? I think it was a sperm and an egg, if I remember right. That's what I was thinking. And this has been very helpful for me the last month. It's like, okay, the body did come from the sperm, the egg, and the broccoli, but I don't think the mind did. And so that's, been helpful for me to really look at all these parts and like, well, okay, because I'm pretty clear that the mind is not form. Yeah, that's something that makes all kinds of sense to me. And then I think someone else was like, who will I be without this body? It's all I know. And so what she said is, look for your resistance, your innate afflictions, your active ignorance. Look for this resistance, and then see how far your mind is away from conventional reality. And then see how far your mind is away from the ultimate reality. So contrast your gut feeling with this reality, and then take refuge in what the Buddha taught, because you're seeing this disparity that the Buddha taught. And as I say, I never would have understood this without the Buddha's teachings, although it's just so clear. Open up the body, look at any of the parts. None of them are beautiful. It's like if you're going to make, I'm not a cook, but I do know one thing. If you make everything with really crappy ingredients, what you come up with is a crappy meal. And so if everything in the body is foul, how do we get it to be beautiful? That's my question. How we do that is just amazing. So we are conditioned, that's how, from probably beginningless time. But, so look for your resistance. See how far your mind is away from the conventional reality of what this body is. And then see how far your mind is from the ultimate reality. Contrast your gut feeling with the reality. And then take refuge in what the Buddha taught. I thought that was all good advice. So we have this romantic fantasy of glorifying the body. And as one person in our group said, all the ads you see of models, none of them even look like that. The skin doesn't have any pores in the ads because they take out all the pixels. So, no one even looks like that. And actually, I remember one other person was saying they knew somebody who was a model who didn't look anything like the pictures. She looked beautiful in the pictures, but outside the pictures, no. And I remember reading this, listening to this thing by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and this just amazes me. I think it has to do with the tenet system stuff about how they really get into looking at parts. And this is partly why. And he tells this thing of like, just imagine somebody you're attracted to. Okay, picture somebody in your mind. Take a moment. Somebody that you think is quite attractive. Now take them completely apart. All the parts. And look at all of the different parts of them and just lay them out on the table. Like say it was Miss America. She's so beautiful. Or, some, would it be? Richard Gere, I guess. I don't know. He's a Buddhist. You might know who he is. Somebody. Who? Richard Gere. Okay. Somebody you think is good looking. They're so good looking. But now take them completely apart. Take the skin, put it there, put the eyeballs over there, hands there, the insides there. Just splatter it all about. And all of those parts look so bad, but now snap it back into what? Snap it all back and boom, your mind just snaps back. Oh, they're so beautiful. It's just, the mind just snaps right back. We see the whole. We don't see the parts. That was kind of the point. So then we had these kind of things. Try this. If you're attracted to somebody, try thinking about them being about 80 years older than they are. That was one of these, say you're attracted, think of somebody who's really young. That you watch TV, there's some athlete on there, they're usually pretty young. Wow, look how good looking that Olympic, whatever is. Now imagine how attractive they are in 80 more years. That's the identity of the body, And then look at your own body and think like, okay, what's my body made of? Sperm, egg, and food. Okay, now we're sitting at the table. And there's this plate of food. You have your plate and I have my plate. But if we switch plates, we're switching each other's body now. Because this is going to become my body and that was your body. But if I took your plate, now that's my body. Right? I mean, it's going to be my body pretty soon. Or when is it your body? Or which parts are your body? Is the blood your body but your feces is not? Do you think that snot that comes out of your nose is not your body? But maybe your blood is, because that's mine, that feels like me, but these other ones don't feel like me? Or how far away does it have to be from you when it's not your body? This is how crazy our mind is. I listened to a lot of our things, so let's see. And then think of all the identities that we put on this body. Okay, we think we are just, we have all these identities of who I am as a person. And it's all based on the body. There's the gender, there's the race, there's the old young thing, there's the skinny fat thing, there's the good looking, not good looking thing. We have so much of our self-worth that's based around attracting others. That's all the body. And to me, this, I think, has some really kind of, I think, quite damaging social events, happenings, implications. I don't know what the word is. This is what happens in the world. Teenagers take steroids. I looked at some pictures of baseball players from before steroids were around. Like, there's a really famous baseball player, I don't know, Ted Williams, I think is his name. He looks like just he's so skinny. You don't even see a baseball player that looks like that now. Their arms are like tree trunks. And that guy was like one of the best baseball players ever, because everybody has to pump up on steroids and whatever, I mean, it's just so crazy. So, teenagers take steroids a lot, not because they want to be athletes. It's because they want to have more muscle mass. And this is the whole cosmetic surgery thing, I remember I was at the dentist's office and was reading about this 20-something woman who was quite beautiful, who wanted to be a little more beautiful because it makes her feel better, so she gets all this cosmetic surgery. And she's actually quite fine looking already, but this makes me feel better. That's what she said. I was like, wow, why? So that's amazing. So, and I guess the thing that I also find, I think is quite damaging is the things around our sexuality. This is my own feeling, is that the body is foul. And a lot of the things that we try to put our mind into in terms of having sexual experiences, we try to make something that has aspects that are kind of foul not be foul because they're supposed to be enjoyable. But only parts of it are enjoyable. Other parts of it aren't. But when you're young, I think this is actually quite damaging. I think there's a lot of our self-image related around sexuality. I mean, I've seen people as young as... I've seen people try to sexualize even 3-year-olds. So, I mean, it just goes down so low. And I think this is very damaging. That's my own view. It's way out of touch. So, that's my 2 cents. So we use this body meditation, we use it in meditation, we learn it and develop it in meditation, but then you take it on the road, so to speak. You just bring it to mind during the day at times if it's useful as an antidote. One thing that should be, this I thought was a good piece of advice was, don't take this meditation, if you're doing the meditation as foulness of the body, to the point of aversion. That is not the point. If you do that, you're merely exchanging attachment for aversion now. And that's really not what you want. My experience with this, and it's like what this person said, only his words I think are better than mine, it makes your mind more balanced and it's kind of, I feel kind of sober, but it's more a kind of equanimity. And I think, a feeling of dispassion towards the body is what it says in the sutras. So if you find that you go a lot towards aversion and it's going that way, then you probably you should probably move and do the elements rather than the foulness, is what they recommended, which you'd have to learn about, not tonight. It's too big of a topic. Okay, so what's left? I think that I'll just list a few of the benefits because I liked these. This is from the sutra in the Middle Length Discourses, which is number 119. And this is the one called Mindfulness of the Body. And one thing I want to point out is this foulness of the body is just one. This sutra, Mindfulness of the Body, it starts with mindfulness of breathing, and then it goes on to the 4 postures of the body, full awareness, foulness, which is what we've been discussing, the elements. These are all meditations of mindfulness of body. Then the 9 charnel ground contemplations, then the jhanas, which are the meditative states. And so all of those are part of mindfulness of the body. So then the benefits from the mindfulness of body meditation from that sutra are listed as this. When mindfulness of the body has been repeatedly practiced, developed, cultivated, used as a vehicle, used as a basis, established, consolidated, and well undertaken, these 10 benefits may be expected. I think that's important because we kind of think it's going to happen next week. But when you see this list, you'll know it won't happen. But the first 3 are a little more closer. So the first one is, one becomes a conqueror of discontent and delight. And discontent does not conquer oneself. One abides overcoming discontent whenever it arises. So discontent and delight. Not having them pull you around like a cow with a chain through your nose. And then the second one is, one becomes a conqueror of fear and dread. And fear and dread do not conquer oneself. One abides overcoming fear and dread whenever they arise. So they arise, but you have these various tools. One bears heat and cold, hunger and thirst, and contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, the sun, creeping things. One endures ill-spoken, unwelcome words and arisen bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, disagreeable, distressing, and menacing to life. So basically, most of our day, things that come up that we don't like. This meditation has the potential to help if if it's well undertaken. And then the next one is the jhanas, then the super normal powers, the divine ear, understanding the minds of others, the clairvoyance, recollecting one's past manifold lives, the divine eye, direct knowledge, deliverance of mind, basically destruction of the taints. So, and then the last thing I wanted to share is something that Venerable Children said, that remember when you end every meditation session, think this way. This is the body I've been taking since beginningless time, under the influence of afflictions, ignorance, and tainted karma. I don't want to keep doing this. I want liberation. And other beings are taking this body too, and there's nothing in their body to desire and be attracted to. Instead, I should want them to be free of such a body under the influence of afflictions and karma. And so I dedicate this to cultivating compassion for them, generating bodhicitta, and attaining enlightenment. And think about it this way. Instead of having this view, unrealistic view of the body, that then we spend all of our time just running around trying to do whatever to please it, and especially sex, which is the biggest draw. Instead of that, just think about our precious human life and our vast potential that we have. It's what we can do with this potential that is really the meaningful thing. Does anyone have any questions or comments? It was a lot to go over, but I wanted to get all these points in because it felt like they hit to the purpose.
I was wondering if you have any thoughts about, other than thinking of how it would be to put on your cheek some of these body parts, if you've been kind of accustomed towards a view that the body's like meat, or because there's even this exhibit that they had going through different museums,
right.
The bodies exhibit. I didn't go, but
yeah.
I heard from other people that it was cool. No one said, "Oh, it was disgusting."
Yeah.
So how would we really?
Yeah, I think I feel like it's really easy to sanitize things myself, and so what I do is I try to do things that are I oftentimes think about when my cat has eaten a mouse, and I've seen the insides when they're kind of fresh, because cadavers are kind of they're kind of gross, but they still, in all the diagrams, in a way, they're kind of sanitized. So I think it has to be kind of more a visceral experience. You might want to help with the composting toilet. Let me tell you, it's definitely foul. I think for me, I have to make it visceral, and so I think if you bring in the other senses, it might help, like the smell of things. I think that's a lot of times when somebody's kind of attractive, but then they have really bad breath. It's like, okay, they're attractive, but So I find that because I'm kind of sensitive, I don't have that good a sense of smell, but smells are pretty a strong thing. And so thinking about things in ways that elicit, you have to kind of bring it to life, I think.
I know that for myself, any of the photographs that have ever been taken around tragedies, whether it's floods and typhoons and wars and landmines and stuff, the whole world is captured with bodies being destroyed and bloated, and if you really want to see what it is the suffering of having this body. This is the way it looks.
And actually, you remember that time Pema told that story? That comes up to me. Yeah. This actually is one thing that I do sometimes. Is there's a woman who was with us on retreat some years ago, and she witnessed this. I don't know where they were. It was a high-speed train, really, really high-speed train, and this man threw himself in front of it and committed suicide. But what happened was they were all at the train station, and they're all near the rails and in the waiting area outside, and all of a sudden it kind of started raining. And what it was he was exploded. This train was going so fast, he was just showering little flakes of body, and it all over them. And I remember when she told us that story, we were on retreat. I was like, whoa! But I bring that to mind sometimes when I do this meditation, because it was quite a stunning thing. And I think Venerable brings that up sometimes. She says when she thinks of people that have been, had parts blown off and this and that. This is, I think, one way she brings it to mind. Pretty graphic. But these things happen. And that's the thing. It's just, this is conventional reality. This is nothing more. We're not trying to go any farther than what is there. That's when you really read the way the Buddha wrote it. It's just like that. It's just what is there. He's not going any farther with it when you read the translations. They're not like trying to hate the body or anything. There's just, this is what it is. Anything else? Yeah.
Question online. How do you cultivate affection and establish others as lovable while also seeing the foulness? Do we approach these meditations at different times?
Yeah, these are, in terms of the meditations, they're done at different times, because usually the one on foulness you're doing for lust and attachment, and the one for affection you're usually doing when you have anger. And so if you find that you have a lot of anger in your mind, then it's really helpful to do the metta kind of meditations. But in my mind, when I do this one on the body, my own experience is it doesn't make me feel that people are repulsive at all. That has not been my experience. That's what I would expect, actually. I didn't really want to do this meditation because I kind of live with a certain amount of pain in my body, and I'd rather just kind of ignore it. But so I've kind of had an aversion to doing this meditation, but it's been nothing like what I thought it would be, and everyone who does it has said the same thing. So I have a feeling that may not come up, because if anything, in my mind, when I've done this meditation, I have kind of a somber sense of, wow, look at what we're doing. I hate to say this for our wonderful cook, but I'm like, wow, we're spending all this time making this food, and it really tastes good, and now look where it's going to end up. And it makes me actually feel a sense of sorrow, but it's not in a way that I find people repugnant, because I think you'd have to go too far. That would be like aversion. It'd be more like, like for me, when I was younger, I used to not be able to look at people when they were in wheelchairs until I went to physical therapy school, and then I understood what was happening for these people. And then I could look at them and interact with them because I knew and understood more. And I think this would be kind of similar. When I see people, because I've worked with people with different kinds of deformities and this and that, because I understand something, I find it easier to relate to people, not harder. People who have deformities and all kinds of, things that are, what's the word, disfiguring kind of things. When you're used to this, and when you can just see it for what it is, it's actually easier, I think. I think you can be closer, personally. That's my experience. When I understand something better, I don't have the repulsive side going. I see a person who happens to have this body. And that's how it is for all of us. We are all, beings with the Buddha potential with bodies. So we need to, it's the cause of compassion, if anything. So that's how I see it. So I think you have to try it and find that for yourself.